So obviously, everything that can go wrong will go wrong. And even Intel graphics drivers are not infallible. Anyway, let's talk about freeing the device spectrum. Who in this room has heard of the Plasma Active project? OK, for you, it's going to be very boring. So we are a free software developer. First, very quickly about me. I've been hacking on KDE, especially on Plasma forever. Co-founded the Plasma Active project, do some organizational stuff. I love scuba diving, and I read my email once in a while. Computing moved on. A few years ago, everything happened basically on desktop computers, on laptop computers. If you wanted to check anything on the internet, you had to sit down on a chair and boot up a computer. Nowadays, it happens in our hand. It happens on smartphones. It happens on tablets, on media center. And it's probably going to move on for quite a while still. The only options for that, though, are currently Apple and Android. I don't think we really have to talk about the freedom that Apple provides you with their devices and ecosystems. But for Android, it's quite a different story. Android is license-wise free software, but not process-wise. There's no participation in the community, not in the development of Android. Basically, they throw source code over the wall once in a while, and that's what you have to deal with. So is Android free enough? If you want to write an application, if you want to look at its source code, yes. If you want to participate, if you want to take influence, if you want to take control, definitely not. So the free software community really has to think about this. And a while ago, I watched a movie about Kennedy, and in the early 60s, he noticed that there was a problem with progress. And Kennedy said, space is the new ocean. We need to think beyond what we have been doing until now. And he set a goal for his community, which was America back then. And we kind of did something very similar to that. We saw, OK, we have basically a completely free system for laptop computers and for desktop computers. But computing is moving on. And freedom has not yet found its way onto these new devices. So for us, devices are the new ocean. Devices are the new thing we need to liberate. And that is a very unique challenge for us. You know, we're used to being able to run the software we write on the same device. And with tablet computers, with smartphones, with all these embedded platforms, that's just not the case anymore. So it's become more complex. It's become a more complex development process. Also, we get to deal with a problem we were facing 10 years ago on desktop and laptop computers. There weren't any good drivers. That problem is basically solved for yesterday's devices. There are new devices, same problem. Closed bootloaders. Hard to get source code for graphics drivers. And then when we go to these vendors, which for most devices are sitting in China, and we ask, so could you please supply us the source code for these devices that are using GPL software? In the best case, they say no, and in the worst case, you don't get an answer at all. So we need to shift our mindset, but we also need to shift the mindset of the people around us. And new devices are really quite different. So first of all, it's not that everything is going to happen on a tablet, on a smartphone, but the spectrum of devices is expanding. It's becoming more and more. The use cases are spreading more evenly across different devices. And of course, we can maybe compile our software, which is platform independent, to run on such a device, but try running LibreOffice on your smartphone, and you will find it pretty limiting. So we also need support for new input methods. We need to take not only touch and swipe, but also sensors and how people are used to using these devices into account. And one of the things we think is that all these devices are different, they serve different use cases, but it doesn't mean that you can just cut out from all your systems the things that are different for all devices, because then you end up with a very dumbed down interface. And I think that is, that's probably really well shown if you look at Microsoft's Metro and look at somebody actually trying to use it. People will feel very limited because it tries to reduce your way of using it to what is possible on all devices at the same time, and we think it's wrong. So what we are doing with that is we put the UI, including the input methods, as a very thin layer on top of the applications. For input, we're using switchable UI profiles. So for example, an application developer uses a text component, and if you have a keyboard and mouse plugged in, you can select with your mouse and you type in with your keyboard. But if you're using it on a touchscreen device, you will be able to copy and paste in a different way, for example, by long press. And what we've implemented is that the system will automatically switch these mechanisms in the background. So as an application developer, you just use one set of libraries or one set of components or widgets, and depending on the device, they change behavior. For that, we want to adapt to the hardware where it's beneficial or necessary, but we want to keep the code base as common as possible so that it's easy for us to run an application on a new kind of device, and that the changes we need to make to get the most out of these devices are as small as possible, so we can quickly move on and maintain a high level of consistency across these devices. And that means sharing code where possible, because that's really in our blood. And we found out by getting these things going that we can actually share 90+% of all the code. So most of the applications have mostly already been written. We just need to do the special part adaptations for example, touchscreen devices, or think of a layout for a tablet. And it's not just code. We can write code, but honestly, nobody's going to pick it up. We need to work with the people who are creating the hardware. We need to talk to driver vendors. We need to talk to users and try to find a way to get it to them. And especially we, as a source code producing upstream community, need to think in terms of the whole process, in terms of the product that ends up in the user's hands, because otherwise this is not going to happen, and it will forever be limited to a very, very small crowd that is actually able to get all these things on a device. And as I said already, that is quite a bit harder than just compiling a tarball on your desktop machine, running make, install, and then starting it. So with Plasma, a few years ago, we introduced a framework for building user interfaces. And from the beginning, we thought about we want to move this at some point beyond desktop computers. So we kept in mind that we should probably not rely on a left and a right mouse button being available, but have that in a different layer of our abstraction. And of course, being free software people, we're using an open development model, which means you can look into our kitchen. Whenever I enter a restaurant and I can look into the kitchen, my trust level goes way up. So I think that's a very good thing. So KDE Plasma Active is not necessarily an OS which you can run on a tablet. Sure you can, but it's an adaptive. Is this still on? Yeah. It's an adaptive technology that forms itself around different classes of devices, and that is built to support an even wider range. For example, we'll most likely, in the first half of next year, also releasing a media center interface. And is Cindy actually in this room? She's not. But the main developer of the Plasma Active Media Center interface is running around here at the conference as well. She's called Cindy, and she's a very smart person. If you're interested in that, talk to her. We're looking for near perfect integration across devices, which means that an application looks slightly different, but for example, it supports the same kinds of file formats across devices, that applications across devices are interoperable, so that you don't have to make a choice for a specific application based on what it can do, but you just run the same thing on different devices. It adapts itself, and you get a more consistent and easier to learn experience. Also, we don't want to reinvent the whole world pretty much like Android does, so we're using a proven classic Linux stack with a kernel, dbus, X, and all that kind of stuff. And on top of that, we're exchanging the user interface. So what we're building is a new user experience on top of what we all know by heart pretty much. And as I said, an open development model. You can look into the kitchen, you can see what's going on, and you can take part in it and can influence it. But with the current situation on the market, just throwing another system and waving the freedom flag is probably not going to be enough. We need to provide something for the user that the user actually sees more value. And most people in this room probably think, yeah, freedom provides more value. But many people don't, and we want to grow outside of this free software crowd. And we have a unique opportunity. Systems like iOS and Android are actually built around a commercial model that is around selling apps and selling content to a certain degree. And being a free software system, we don't have to do that. We don't have to play by these rules. We can deliver much more value with a default system than, for example, Android or iOS can do, because they would be basically screwing the ecosystem if they provided more value. We also do not need central control for things like an app store. We actually have included in Plasma Active a so-called federated app store. And it's not just an app store, it's also content. So imagine it's like a really nice interface on, for example, a package manager. It's a bit more complex than that, but you can add your own sources. You can pre-configure different app stores. You can control where these things come from. And also, the App Store side is free software. So you can run your own App Store. You can provide devices with these App Stores pre-configured. You can provide contents to your users. And you can even add App Stores from other vendors onto your devices. And what we're creating here is not a hierarchical model, but more a networked approach to content and app delivery. Also, we built this system in mind with different user interfaces. That means, for example, a school can decide to ship their own app store, but also ship their own user experience, which is made for a certain demographic. Think of age, think of cultural or language background. Our code base is open, so it's fully audible, it's hackable, you can change it, and there is no vendor lock-in, of course. So for the reference implementation of Plasma Active, we're using a three-tiered approach. So basically, we have these building blocks. We have hardware adaptations for a number of devices, and we have the mere core OS, which provides dbus, X, and these things. And on top of that, we have the higher level libraries, which includes the so-called KDE platform and the UI layer for different devices. And you can mix and match those. If you want to support a new device, you basically need to get a kernel and a matching bootloader, and the script will compile an image for you, which you can then run on top of these devices. And in the usual case, you will already find perfectly integrated packages for a given CPU architecture. So you just have a kernel with the suitable drivers, create an image of that, and bang, you can support a new piece of hardware. Also, Mare is a pretty small code base. Mare is actually the successor to MeeGo, which was used on the Nokia 9 telephones and which came out of the MIMO project. It is still actively developed, and it's also commercially used by Jolla, which is creating new mobile phones based on this system. For the whole cross-compiling nightmare, which some of you have gone through, we're using the open build service, which means that you can upload a tarball, and it will create packages for different configurations, for example, for a different CPU architecture, or built against different versions of your underlying software. And it also puts these automatically into repositories so that a lot of the packaging and deployment tool chain is done on the open build service. In the cloud, it's not your CPU that does multiple builds of the same code base, but it happens on a huge cluster and takes care of the deployment for you as well. So the developer story is obviously very important. We want people to extend, to improve the whole system, to build applications for it, and to help us hacking on it. On top of it sits Plasma Quick, which is the Quick QML language. It's a declarative way of describing your UI. Makes it really easy to build nicely animated, smooth, and also touch-friendly UIs. It builds on Qt and on the KDE framework. We provide all the tooling for that, and if you want to create your images, we use the Mere SDK and the Open Build service. We've actually wrapped this into developer personas. Those are Chad, Luang, and Brian. And Chad, you could think of someone who is maybe kind of web developer, very familiar with things like JavaScript, but who is not going to touch a compiler with a 10-foot pole. So we make it easy to write complete complex applications without any compiled code, just on top of the Plasma runtime. In some cases, you will find yourself with an existing application. There are a few examples, the Calligra Office suite, for example, or the Ocular document reader, which supports a wide range of formats. And in that case, this is basically Luang. Luang comes with an existing code base, parts of them C++, and she wants to build a device-adaptive UI on top of that. And Brian, he's basically Luang, but he wants to take part in the development. He wants to be a creator of the system. He wants to take part in the community. And these are the personas we work with when we think of our developer story. And for all these personas, we have slightly different tools, different sets of documentation that is interesting, and of course also different ways of deployment. So the non-compiled code you can basically just put on a USB stick or rsync or SCP onto your device and run it. The other things obviously need to go through a cross-compilation, often on the open build service. Now, this whole system being fully auditable, being open, is very interesting to institutions and for the so-called enterprise use case. It's a controllable stack. You can use the same software across different devices, so you might save training costs or specialized software development. It would be, for example, very easy to use very similar tools on a tablet that you would give your sales representatives or to your students, but run a very similar piece of the same software on a desktop or laptop computer. We have flexible and individual content and app stores, which is very interesting if you're doing multimedia stuff and consumer devices, but also, again, for this educational setting where you might have a lot of content that is differently licensed, and you need fairly deep control who gets what and how these things are all, how these things end up being paid and licensed. We can fall back to a lot of high-quality software that comes from the bigger KDE community, and there's, for example, Contact Touch, which is a touch-friendly port of the contact suite, so it provides email, calendaring, and all these things And there again, most of the code runs that on a device is the same as on the desktop. There's just a different UI on top of that. So they work together really well. We also have excellent document support with the Kugler office suite. Actually have Shantanu here, who is working on the Plasma Active board of that. It has really good support for importing Microsoft formats, and its native format is open document. So you can create your presentation, for example, or your documents on your desktop. And you can take it easily on the road, and you will know that there's no incompatibilities on a format or on a low level. You know that the files you save on one machine, you can open on the other machine and the other way around, and you can do that 1,000 times, and it won't break. You can also easily create custom software, and you can easily create your custom devices, and that provides a level of flexibility that vendors such as Apple and Android simply cannot match. On top of that, not everybody can do everything by himself, so we created a network which is the start of a commercial ecosystem where you can get commercial support, where you can get help in different areas from companies that have proven to have the right kind of knowledge and that have committed to working well with the rest of the ecosystem and the community. And that is called the Make, Play, Live Partner Network. And also that is an open thing. If your company is interested in providing professional services around it and has the expertise to do so, it's a good thing to join this network because it gets you in contact with the right people. So current status. In October, we released our third version. It's called Plasma Active 3. It has a few new bigger applications. We have a semantic file manager. We have added the document reader I was talking about earlier, and we've included the client for the App Store. And at the same time, we've released the source code for the server side of the App Store, which is written in Node.js. So you got now a few more pieces that serve even more use cases than before. We've also vastly improved the input method by using the Malit keyboard, which has already been in development for a few years. So it's also a very stable, very flexible code base. Also there, we put a matching and consistent UI on top of that, so it looked like it really belongs to the system. And as with every release, there's thousands of bug fixes, and performance is really noticeably better. So I promised earlier on Twitter that I would show something really new today, and I will. So in Plasma Active 4, we will be shipping a client for file synchronization with the cloud. It is based on ownCloud. Again, server side is free software, just as the client side. What you can see here is a setup module for the tablet UI. So it's our settings application. On the left, you can see different settings modules, and on the right is basically the first step of setting up a folder that you want synchronized with your device. So what does it do? Synchronizes files. Client and server both free software, which means that your data is under your control. You can either hire someone to do it for you, but you can also do it yourself. You don't have to put your fate in the hands of Dropbox and the likes. Also, there are clients for multiple platforms. First of all, obviously a Linux desktop client, Windows client, macOS, iOS, Android, all these are supported. And that's a really great thing, because whatever device you have, you can easily synchronize all your files across these devices. And if you don't have a native client, you can still access it through WebDev, which works pretty well. You can even just open the ownCloud server through your Dolphin or Conqueror by just entering the WebDev URL. And that just works. And as I said, we're doing UIs for different platforms. So it's not just the client for the tablet, but we will also ship at the same time a client for Plasma Desktop. So if you're using these things, you get synchronization. So we've been trying to get out the device this year, and at this point, I'm pretty sure it's not going to happen before the new year. And why not? We've tried, believe us, but we ran into a few problems. First of all, freedom is not in the vocabulary of device manufacturers. I already said it. If you ask for source code, you'll be lucky if you even get a no. There's also a completely different development culture. In some cases, we actually got source code, and then we looked at it, and then we needed a bucket. Size also matters. We came there, and we had fairly low numbers. Let's say you go to China, ask a manufacturer. So I want to buy 10,000 of your devices. They will happily sell you 10,000 of their devices. But 10,000 is not enough for them to actually listen to you if you ask important questions like, hey, we would like to ship a device that is compliant with the licenses that we actually use ourselves. So where's the source code? And then they point you to kernel.org. And you go, yes, we know, but we would really like to have the driver that runs on these devices you're shipping. And then again, it's silence. But there is hope. After going through these things a few times, we have the first signs that vendors are... Actually, it happened just a few weeks ago that there was one guy working at one company, and apparently he moved jobs. And one of the first things he did at his new job was write us an email. So yeah, I'm working for a new company. You've been asking for a bunch of devices, and we have that. And we have source code for that. So we couldn't believe our eyes. Said, can you read this for me? Yes, it really says that. So slowly, people start to learn. And as we keep banging our heads against these walls, if we do this as a shared effort, we will eventually succeed. Because, as it says, size matters. And the more people who are asking for source code, the higher the chance that we'll, at some point, actually get this source code. So the Vivaldi was a 7-inch tablet, was planned for summer 2012, not going to happen. We are currently looking for new hardware partners. Likely in the first half of next year, we'll be able to announce a new device. We're a lot more timid with that. We first want to know that we really can do it before we come out, as to not disappoint people again. As I said, it's not easy, but we're really committed to getting this out. Of course, you can read a lot of documentation on that or get in touch with us very easily. The portal user-facing website is plasma-active.org. There's a lot of documentation on all kinds of different aspects on the community.kde.org wiki. Development happens on the active@kde.org mailing list. And if you want to ask a quick question or just hang around, see what's going on, see commits flying by all the time, join us on Freenode. If you have specific questions, if you're not comfortable with mailing lists, by all means, just send me an email, send me a message on Twitter. I can surely get you in touch with the right people, or maybe even answer your question right away. And this all would be boring without a short demo of what it actually looks like. So one concept that is very, very central to the whole user experience in Plasma Active are activities, and you can think of it as an abstract context you're working in, as a way to organize your files, your URLs, your contacts. So you create an activity, for example, for a subject at school, for an activity that you're doing, such as planning a vacation. You can add files to that. You can connect websites in the form of bookmarks to it. You can add small widgets to that. And also, in this case, we're having a website. And I think in the video, will now be shown how the website you're currently visiting, say you're doing research, and OK, this is interesting for my current activity. Then you will use the ShareLike Connect system. You click the Connect button. You choose your activity. And what's then going to happen is that this bookmark is added. You see it popping up there with your activity. Also, open applications are separated by activity. So if you switch to another application, if you switch to another activity, the applications become basically invisible. So there's a strong separation mapped to how your mind actually works with these. What we see here is the semantic file browser. Semantic means it's not based on a folder hierarchy, but on metadata that is attached to your files. That can be creation date. It can be tags that you attach to it. It can be ratings. It can be a lot more metadata. And we're using a touch-friendly interface. So you use a pinch gesture to select files, and then you drag it onto a certain tag in order to tag it. What you see here is Contact Touch. As I said, it's a complete client for email, for calendaring, for your address book. It's feature equivalent with the desktop version. Here we have an image viewer, which is basically a small adaptation on top of files. This is the reader application. And an interesting bit here, this was created from the desktop version of Ocular. And Marco, the guy who's on the other end of this hand that you're seeing, he did a prototype of this UI in just one day. He basically ripped out the mouse and keyboard UI and took the PDF and document rendering parts and built a new UI around that. UI here is kept very minimal as to help you concentrate on the actual content you're using. And this does not just support PDF, but it supports EPUB and I think about 15 to 20 other very popular formats. Here we have the Calligra suite, spreadsheet application. Any music you don't hear. So if you would actually like to see this in action, Shantanu has a tablet running it. I have a tablet running it. I've learned by experience that doing live demos during a talk is not a good idea. So you get the movie. I'm hanging around here for the rest of the conference. Just come up to me. Hey, can I see it? Can I play with it? Can I break it, please? I go, yes. Not the hardware, yes. You may break the software. OK, how's my time? Do you have time for maybe 2 or 3 questions? Are there any questions? Tobias?
Lovely. So I was told that nowadays it's easy to get all the drivers for hardware and all because of all the Android push. So it's actually, I was told, a requirement or so that they give you all the drivers and all.
If you're an Imora person, it's relatively easy. You can, in many cases, you will be able to use the binary Android kernel and use that for the hardware adaptation and combine it with the rest of the user space. It has a few problems. For example, in one case, we tried to use an Android kernel which was based on 2.6.32, and we wanted to run a more recent user space on that, and it just didn't work. Leonard can probably tell you all the details about that. We tried to boot it, and it was missing the C group support in the scheduler. So it does nasty things in your face, but certainly won't boot. Really, we need source code to do it properly. There's a few hacks. Maybe you can get a device running with it, but to do it properly, to do it in line with our values and principles, source code.
All right, but they do give you eventually blobs for some kernel version then?
Yes, eventually, but it's not a binary choice. The more source code you get, the better it is. But yeah, the ultimate goal is having source code for everything. But yeah, no, most desktop or laptop computers don't even work that way. At some point, you have binary stuff, but obviously, the more source you have, the better.
And who's driving the efforts then, anyway, to buy?
Sorry?
Who's driving the efforts to go to China and buy hardware and I don't know, try to sell that eventually?
We actually founded a company to get out the first device that has also started the Make Play Live partner network. So it's basically a community effort, but we needed to create a body to get the financial risks out of the hands of us personally or the community.
All right, interesting, cool stuff.
Yeah, thank you. Any more questions? In that case, thank you very much for your patience.
I had a very simple question. You showed one application which had some photos where people could tag stuff and all in the video where you showed this. Now, let's say I have a bunch of photos that I'm tagging, and I want to put it on the web. Will the tags stay or will they go away?
The tags are saved on the device, so it certainly has very good use cases, but you might not want it because it's a privacy leak. And
yes, but in many things it's a good way to share things.
Yes, so the metadata is currently not synchronized.
Okay.
We have parts of this solution already in place, but it needs to be very well thought through. As I said, you might not want to upload comments you've added to a file everywhere. It's a very tricky problem.
No, it's because the thing is, if you have these tags, it's not just photos, it's tagging documents, tagging, So you have a whole collection of things that you could tag and just put it. So whenever, if you want to share some things, you have this whole thing which is searchable even by tags. That makes it easier for people who want to share things.
Yeah, but it's currently
Okay.
not implemented.
Okay.
And it depends a bit per case. For example,
Yes.
if I'm popping in my camera into the tablet I'm taking while traveling, and I'm adding a tag that I have no problem with being public, then using that tag to name your photo set on Flickr, for example, would be very useful. But that level of granularity is currently not implemented.
Okay.
But, of course, we're an open community.
Yeah.
You saw where you can help us with that, and we would be very happy for people to come with these ideas and come with good solutions for those. Okay, then, again, I wanted to point out it's a big honor for me to be invited to this conference, to be able to speak to you. Met a lot of friendly people, and everybody who's here, thanks a lot for that.